Today we're gabbing with Dylan Hafer, who is the host of Betches Bravo Focus podcast, Mention It All, and runs the popular Bravo by Betches social accounts. At the end of last year, Dylan and I picked our biggest winners and losers of 2023 for Bravo. So I wanted to have him back on the show halfway through 2024 to pick the biggest winners and losers of the year so far. Things could change. There are still 6 months left in the year, but it went really well last time. So Dylan, I'm glad to have you back for this. How are you? I just saw you last night, but
Thanks, Gibson. I'm great. Yeah, I when you we talked like maybe a month ago about circling back to do this in June, and I'm like, wow, it really has been 6 months since we did this, and a lot has happened. Some things have changed, some things have not, but a lot happens in a half a year on Bravo.
a lot. I mean, I told you I listened back a little bit to our episode, and like one of our biggest winners was Monica Garcia, and I don't know if I would say the same for. So things change quickly around here.
Yeah, look, I think Monica had a very exciting start to 2024. She made a lot of
Totally
headlines. I don't know if she's reaping the benefits of that necessarily.
aligned.
She's getting booked at some gay bars. That's exciting.
She's on that circuit. Yeah, exactly. You know what? Okay, so this episode will come out after we're allowed to talk about what we did last night, which was we went to the 15th anniversary taping for Watch What Happens Live. So we had gone to the party, not to brag to everybody listening, but we went to the party, which that was just sort of like a cocktail hour kind of thing. But last night there was the episode that's going to air on the 30th, I think. Andy had Portia and Phaedra come out. He had Jeff Lewis come out, Jerry O'Connell come out, Sonia and Luann come out, Teresa came out, Dwight was there. We were at that studio, I think, for like 2 or 3 hours last night. I mean,
Yeah.
what were your big notes? What were your big takeaways from that experience?
So it was interesting because I don't know if we technically knew in advance that it was going to be like a doorbell kind of
Right.
special, but I think that's what we were assuming. And it's always interesting with that how they decide to kind of plan it out. Like, what's the mix of people that are invited? Are we doing doorbells constantly the whole show? Are we going to be like 25 people cycling through the clubhouse? And I actually liked the format that they chose, which was there were like seven main guests. They
Yeah.
were after they were each introduced, they were out there for the duration of the show. I was wondering if they were going to kind of like shuffle people in and out at commercial breaks, and I think that would have been a little bit, it just would have been even more hectic than it already
Yes.
was. But it was a really nice special because they focused a lot on some really great montages of things over the years that I'm excited for people to see and like kind of pick apart a little bit. A lot of the guests shared some of their favorite moments in the clubhouse. It really felt like a celebration of Watch What Happens Live itself and not like 15 years of
Bravo.
stuff on Bravo. Because I think
Right.
those two things can be equated sometimes. Obviously, Andy's legacy is going to be deeply ingrained with Housewives and everything else on Bravo. But I think that show, in and of itself, like with what has happened in like the late night TV space in the last 15 years, the fact that Andy and that crew have just kind of been in their little clubhouse in Soho, like churning out the shows for that long. It really is. I don't think we talk enough about how impressive it is that that show has become such a like cultural touchstone because Andy doing a random talk show in like a closet at 30 Rock was not something that I think we would have anticipated to occupy this position, and it's pretty exciting.
I know, I agree. And I liked that they celebrated like even just the names of all the crazy games they played over the years. Like to me, like those were moments of really paying tribute to the production team and everybody who works behind the scenes of that show, which is such a great team. And like I love that we saw some. I don't even know if I've ever seen that footage of Andy, the earliest episodes of that show that were just like in 30 Rock conference rooms and in a closet and like the power. Like I don't think I remember seeing a lot of that footage. That was kind of fun to see too.
Yeah, I don't think I've seen like pre-clubhouse footage of Andy, and like his hair is a lot
Uh,
more salt and peppery than it is these days. Like when you think about how long 15 years is, and then even longer than that, going back to some of those early like web series clips, it's like this really is like a full era. Like
totally.
it really is crazy. And I think it was a nice special. We got a little bit of Gay Shark. We got, some surprise guests that
We
I don't want to spoil everything, but
no.
it was a good show.
And I guess we just said that Sonia had some outbursts during the commercial
Oh
breaks.
God.
She
Yeah.
was in rare form, I want to say.
I don't know how, depending on how our winners and losers go, I
Right.
don't know who we might be mentioning again throughout this show, but I do feel like I always am wishing Sonia the best, and I don't know where she's headed right now. So
Right. Right. Okay, so let's jump into biggest winners and losers. So we both came armed with three in each column, but we might have some alternates in case, because the one rule of this is that we just can't repeat the same things for
yes,
winners and losers. So Dylan, as my guest, you get to go first. You can start with a winner or loser, your pick.
thank you for allowing me the honor.
I have home
Um,
court advantage.
my first winner actually ties in, I mean, extremely well with what we were just talking about. I'm going to go with Andy Cohen
Uh,
as a big winner on
I had him
Bravo
too.
this year so far. I think in a few different angles, obviously Watch What Happens Live, we're just talking about, has, really been a bedrock of Bravo the last 15 years. And I think the network still really values it. They're doing a big 15th anniversary kind of rebrand excitement push right now. The anniversary special is going to air in prime time, which is not, something they usually do.
Hmm.
Um, Also, I just think that, 6 months ago when we talked, the all of the like reality reckoning, all of that felt so fresh and like it was still kind of up in the air. And I remember last fall, even before BravoCon, I had talked to some people who were like, "Oh, like what's going to be the vibe at BravoCon? Are they gonna, is it going to happen? Is it going to be ruined? How are they going to address it?" And it really feels like, looking at that situation now, it kind of has all slid off of Andy's back in a way that is, I don't know if it's like remarkable, but it's definitely notable. And some of the lawsuits and stuff. I mean, even last week we saw Brandy like add more, or Leah
Leah
McSweeney, like
added more, yeah.
add more stuff to her lawsuit, basically. And I mean, I'm sure some of that stuff will play out over, the next 6 months, year or two, and maybe Andy will end up like on the receiving end of some tough stuff. But it definitely feels like the network feels really confident standing by him. He is kind of just like not going anywhere in a way that I think maybe 9 months ago there felt like there were some question marks that have pretty much been answered.
Yeah, it was like heading into BravoCon, that stuff kind of felt a little bit like a threat to the industrial complex that is Bravo, and then I think going into this year, it's like Andy just kind of kept chugging along. Like he didn't really pause. He kept doing his radio show. He kept doing Watch What Happens Live. I think a lot of people saw some of the superfluous information that was part of those lawsuits, and it kind of backfired on the people who filed those because it just kind of added to the noise in a way that felt like low blows. And I think that actually, it kind of cultivated more support for Andy in some ways. And, he just kept going. I think that the 15-year anniversary Watch What Happens Live celebration came at literally the perfect time. And I actually wonder if like they leaned into that more and they're kind of making it a louder splash, kind of coming out of some of that stuff, kind of being minimized now. I don't know. I think that it's great. It's great timing.
Yeah, and I mean, just recently he's had a couple, like a magazine cover, a big
Yeah.
profile. Like he hasn't retreated at all. Like he's addressed some of the specifics of what's, been alleged. He's talked about kind of the overall picture of things, and I think that kind of, it feels like he's in a position of strength rather than kind of being on the defense. And I think that's I think it's really notable and maybe not
100%.
not what people might have predicted.
Yeah. All right. I'll go with my first winner, which is Summer House, just as a show, because I mean, to me, Summer House has had such an interesting journey on Bravo because its first two seasons are very forgettable. They weren't well rated. The cast was iffy. They had this big reshuffle. They had a slight reshuffle for season three, and that sort of put it on the trajectory that it's been on ever since. But season eight, the season that just wrapped, highest rated season ever for the show, 8 years in. To me, amid a lot of talk about Vanderpump Rules and the Valley, like to me, Summer House was the one that sort of emerged as the one that like people wanted to talk about first. Like that was the show that people wanted to discuss. And I mean, just anecdotally, a lot of people started watching that show because of the noise around this season and the interest around it. So I kind of feel like Summer House is primed to have, it's kind of a high pressure moment to like follow it up with another good season, I would say. But it's in a position of power right now, I think, at the network. And a lot of the people on that show are high caliber stars now.
Yeah, I think it's interesting because going into this season, knowing that the Lindsay and Carl breakup had happened in the fall, there was a lot of kind of, noise around that specifically. And so I think that was a good sort of hook into this season. But as the season played out, I think there were a lot of different parts of the season that people were really engaging with
Yeah,
and really
totally.
enjoying. And so I think that kind of shows the strength. Whereas, the post Scandival season on Vanderpump Rules, I think it was kind of a little bit of a struggle to kind of like keep the ball rolling beyond that. Whereas with Summer House, I mean, obviously, they haven't had their like post whatever season yet. So we'll see kind of how next season goes. But I think just like watching this season, it was a little bit refreshing to be like, oh yeah, I actually also really enjoy it when they're all just like hanging out and getting along. Or I am enjoying seeing whatever's happening with West and Sierra or the Amanda and Kyle stuff. There's a lot to dig into there that I think we could dig into perhaps more than we have sometimes.
Yeah,
Um, but that like I think seeing the season play out and not just be the Lindsay and Carl show the entire time, I think was
important.
really key to the kind of moment that they're having. And I'm excited to see kind of what comes next for that group as a whole.
Yeah, and I think that like if you compare it to Vanderpump Rules, which like obviously had the big season and there's sort of a letdown season after, I think the difference here is that one, it's earlier into its run as a show, but also you can see the future on Summer House currently. They're over half that cast, you could see them being on the show for 5 or 6 more years and like it being totally legit and working. Like I think some people will eventually graduate out in the next couple of years, but like a lot of those people should be part of the core of that cast going forward. And so it's setting itself up for the future, I think, really nicely. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah. All right. A loser.
Okay, I'll share my first loser. My first loser is perhaps a little bit nebulous, but I think it we can't ignore that the Bravo scheduling situation and sort of how
Same
quickly we're
page.
getting shows back into production, when we're airing shows, when we're having things overlapping. It feels like there has been sort of a crack in the machinery somewhere because uh, the fact that, I mean, just not even taking into account the other factors, the fact that in April, for the first time in over a decade, we had just no housewives on the air for a period of weeks. It's really shocking. And the
I
thing is,
know.
what really kind of makes it wild to me is that it's like we have shows. Like there are shows that are working. It's not like we've canceled a bunch of Housewives franchises and there's like, just nothing in the pipeline. It's like there really are some decisions and some timelines that just seem so strange. Like seeing how long it took them to get the Atlanta reboot situation into production. Obviously, now what's happening with that production is a
Who
separate issue, but
knows?
they announced Portia coming back to the show, and then for months there was no full
Anything
cast, there was
else?
no filming, there was nothing, and it felt like that was something that was dragging on forever. Yeah, so it's like Roni and Southern Charm took a long time to get back into production, even after they had pretty high quality last
Yeah.
seasons. And then Miami still not filming for some
What's the deal?
godforsaken, unclear reason. It just feels like, and then you look back though to when, 6 months ago or 9 months ago, we had Potomac, Beverly Hills, and Miami all premiering within a week of each other. And then their entire seasons, Miami and Beverly Hills were airing back to back on the same night. And it felt like the whole season, it was like, I want to talk about Miami, but I have to talk about Beverly Hills. And is
Yeah.
one of them going to get the short end of the stick? And inevitably, when you have two high quality shows or high, attention value shows running on the same night, you're going to have to kind of pick and choose. And so thinking about like what would have happened if they just saved Miami until February or
Right.
something, and then we would just be wrapping up right now. Like things like that, it feels like they just aren't necessarily, they're not, I don't know like where this kind of issue is originating, but it does feel like there has been some sort of lack of foresight about what do we have, what are we going to have. And I think the thing that makes it even more surprising to me is that we're coming out of this period of a writers and actors strike last year, and you would expect this to be a time that unscripted would really be
Unscripted could fill in the bubble.
booming.
Yep. Yeah.
And it's like, what happened? What was happening last fall? Why was nothing filming?
I know. And it was all coordinated, it seemed, to either have shows airing during BravoCon or premiering around BravoCon,
Mhm.
which I understand on one hand, but on the other, I'm like, why does it all have to revolve around, why does the programming have to revolve around BravoCon? Like, I don't think it impacts how many people are going to come to the Miami panel, whether it's on now or in 3 months, or there's other ways for that, for BravoCon to make headlines and make splashy announcements and things like that. So I think that's like where it was tied out of. But again, they didn't think about what was going to happen on the end of it, and like adding to the Miami and Atlanta delays that are annoying, which is like we're missing a lot too. We missed a lot of the Alexia stuff that's happening with her and Todd. We missed a lot of the Portia stuff. It seemed like, I mean, I think that's going to continue to be ongoing, but like they announced Portia, and then like there are a lot of developments with her and Simon, and like what was going on with their divorce, and the cameras just aren't gonna. We're never going to see that footage. So, or that footage doesn't exist. So that kind of adds to the feeling that it kind of brings more attention to the production element and the scheduling of it all, you know?
Yeah, and I think I'm very much in favor of certain shows taking a little time off,
Same.
or taking time to regroup, make sure they're really going into a season with the right cast, with the right set of circumstances. But I think if you're going to kind of allow for that, then you have to kind of make that up somewhere else, if that makes sense. And so it's
Yeah.
like, it does feel like there kind of was this like compiling, and I think BravoCon is a good kind of thing to pin it around. But then it's like, it also, as much fun as it is to be at BravoCon, and you and I are very fortunate to just like be at
Go.
BravoCon kind of because we are, but it's like, okay, there's, 20,000, 30,000 people at BravoCon that are seeing these panels, but then there's like 2 million people that have nothing to watch for all of April. And I don't
Right.
think that that's like a fair trade-off.
No, it doesn't net out. No, not at all. And I think that two ways, before I move on to my first loser, are two ways that I feel like they have sort of, they're shifting the balances. They rushed in production on Potomac, which I thought they would need to kind of like take a beat there, but they clearly had some women sort of on deck to fill in this cast, which I think was, that gives me some confidence in what they're feeling around that show. And also, I feel like they turned around OC fairly quickly. Like I feel like the wait between filming ending on that and it coming back in less than a month is pretty. It was pretty good. I think they recognize the need for that.
Yeah, and they're following the momentum with OC, I think, which is super smart. I mean, I think the anticipation for a season of Orange County, I can't recall it ever being higher.
Me
So,
neither. Me neither. Okay, my first loser is the OG Roni cast, because I think we talked right before we did our winners and losers list of 2023, sort of right as Legacy Girls Trip was premiering, I think in December.
mm,
And it sort of remained to be seen how that would go. I think maybe we had seen the first 3 episodes, which are really great. It was the kind of back to the old hijinks. But I think, as you mentioned last night when we were together, that season sort of petered out. It sort of just like whimpered along, and like I think they skipped a whole day and sort of what we saw on the show, and it sort of, I think that kind of cut any chances of them sort of like getting one of those every year. You know what I mean? Like whether that was even on the table ever, but like that was sort of out in the air. And then we have like, Luann, who's conquering the world. She's at like fucking music festivals in England and performing all over the UK, and none of that's being documented. We have, Sonia, who knows what's going on with her, but like no more Crappy Lake in the future. Like I could have seen that being maybe some sort of like every other year, yearly thing. Dorinda's on Traders, but she's not back on Bravo. Like Traders is going to be a moment in time for her, which is I'm excited about, but it just feels like the OG women, other than maybe like every couple months being on Watch What Happens Live, they're kind of out of reach for us on our TVs.
yeah, I definitely agree about that season of Girls Trip, where it was like the idea of it was very exciting. There were some great moments. There were kind of those like glimpses of what we love so much, but then kind
Yeah.
of, I don't think the whole was more than the sum of its parts really in any way with that show. And I think people like Kelly and Kristen, they brought I think they brought value to the season in a way that we needed, but I don't think that they are necessarily people that would be like back in a more permanent capacity. I don't know if they would be interested in it. I don't know if it would make sense even if they were. Yeah, the Luann stuff, I mean, I don't, that's the kind of thing, and I might get to this with one of my things later, but it's like we could watch like a 4 episode Peacock spin-off of like Luann takes the UK, or Luann
Hoopla.
takes Europe or something. Like it just feels like those types of things where it's like I get that maybe we're not doing like Roni Legacy again, but it does feel like they still have talent that they really clearly want to keep some kind of relationship with. And it's like at a certain point, what are we doing with those people if we're not casting them on Housewives? And I think,
Yeah.
I mean, for some people, maybe that it's fine to do a Traders and then do, maybe a girls trip in a couple of years like that. That might be enough, but it does feel like there is just kind of like there's like a little bit of a hole there of like
Yeah.
what to actually do with those
I mean,
people.
there's nobody that I hear more about in terms of them. Like they're just the people that get brought up all the time. They're quoted the most on social media. People like say I think because of how the New York switch was handled, it's just always going to be this like feeling that that they were kind of like fucked over a little bit.
Yeah, there's no other housewives who have been like thrown out as a group.
Yeah,
So
except for
maybe,
DC.
yeah, true. I'm like, maybe Sheree can fired three
Right,
times. Maybe she
right,
can
right,
join up.
right. All right, Dylan, who's your next winner?
Okay, my next winner is the Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, because
Okay,
I guess when we recorded last, their fourth season was airing. We had not seen the instant classic finale.
they had not gone to
Um,
Bermuda.
that trip to Bermuda. I mean, I feel like that's one of those things where like I'm sure at the time that it was being teased a little bit. I'm sure Andy was like, "You guys, there's something
The
coming. This
finale,
finale." And you know how we take a little like Andy tease with a grain of salt. We always are like,
of
"Okay, yeah,
course.
sure." Real Housewives of Salt Lake City, the 2 weeks surrounding that finale, I feel like we've already kind of like forgotten a little bit, but we were obsessed. Like it was such a moment and such the receipts proof timeline that had a whole life
Oh,
on, TikTok, everything. It was such a moment. And I think looking back to a year prior when Jen was going to prison, there was so much uncertainty surrounding where that franchise was going to go and kind of what they were going to do without Jen, and seeing how well season 4 played out. Obviously Monica is turning a little bit of a flash in the pan when it comes to Housewives greatness,
right.
but I think there are four OGs in the cast. That kind of core four have really developed such a strong dynamic as a group. And I was talking to Heather about this because she was at the 15th anniversary party a couple weeks ago, and I was saying, like, I think what works so well with their group is that they they need to play the game, and they know they
Yes.
need to mix it up with each other, but at the same time I think they understand kind of where the lines are, so that if Heather is fighting with Whitney one season, they can have a really heated dynamic, but they're not taking things to such a place of darkness and such a place of, below the belt, that they can't then kind of have a comeback together narrative the next season. And I think for the four of them, we've seen pretty much every permutation at this point of who's getting
Yep.
along and who's not. And I think that actually really works. And I think Angie turned out to be a really
Huge
kind of like,
surprise.
she was a little bit of a late bloomer. It took a little bit for her to kind of like arrive, I think, in terms of the like fan acceptance, but I really think that she is so much fun on the show. And the fact that they, in addition to Potomac, they got right back into filming after this season aired, and they're already done, they're wrapped, they're ready to go. And it's kind of wild thinking back a couple of years ago how much was going on with Jen and the feds and all of that, that they have sort of turned into the low maintenance franchise a little bit. That
Crazy.
it's
Yeah.
like they filmed their season in the spring, they're done, it airs in the fall. They pull another trick out of the sleeve and then right back into production. And they've done that, the last 2 years. And I don't know exactly what their season 5 is going to be like, but I'm excited to see it. And it's pretty impressive with all the kind of like tumult that's happening across Bravo, that they kind of are just like going to work and getting it done.
They're like quietly a well-oiled machine all of a sudden, and like you said, they know what it takes. And to me, another kind of big thing that the reality Von Teese of it all proved was like Housewives still has a big moment like that in it. And I think because I think
Mhm.
people really like to write. I mean, again, it came amid sort of like the reality reckoning of it all, where like, is Housewives over? Is it past its whatever? And it's like, well, we just had one of the biggest, most memorable moments it's had in the past 10 years, a couple months ago, you know? And like I think that we can't forget that because that it told me that there we can still be surprised, we can still have new like moments that we've never seen before. It's a totally new kind of scandal that happened in the finale, and like they they delivered on it, and it was some of the most memorable TV I think of the entire year. I can't see much else surpassing that.
Yeah, and I think the reality Von Teese stuff, I think it was notable in that it was shocking and like you said, something we hadn't seen before, but at the same time, a critique that you see of Housewives now is that it's like, oh, it has to be about somebody going to jail or somebody, a family being broken up or a cheating scandal. And like it was big and shocking, but at the same time, like kind of ridiculous.
Right,
And I think,
exactly.
the idea of it being a fan account and that there's, rumors and receipts and all of that, but it's like it's not like Heather's life was ruined because of reality Von Teese. It was something that we were able to kind of laugh about versus it being kind of like another notch in that like this show is so degraded at
Yeah,
this point.
right,
Like
right. Yeah. And it's like
Carol
the
Radziwill,
further
like
we right,
talking
the,
point.
the
Yeah.
further we get away from it too, it's like the more we can laugh about it, and the more they can probably
Yes.
laugh at it, which I think is important. All right, my next winner is Jackson Kristen, because to me, because when Jax and Kristen and Stassi all left or all were fired from Vanderpump Rules the same season, Brittany as well. I thought Brittany was sort of like collateral damage with Jax. Like I don't know if she was really like she left kind of because of Jax, I felt. And to me, at the time in the past couple years, it was hard to imagine Jax and Kristen's second chance ever happening, or if it did happen, it going over well. Leading up to the premiere of the Valley, I thought that until the second that premiere aired. I thought that. I was not convinced. I was not compelled. And they carried and delivered an amazing first season of a new show to spin off of Vanderpump Rules, but mostly a new cast. They got us to care. They got us to be invested pretty quickly. Jackson, Kristen, producer hands kind of showed at some points, but like they delivered on their second chance because and to me it was part of it just sort of like they know what it's like not to have a show. They know what it's like to have it be taken away, and they were going to fuck this up. And I'm just genuinely impressed. Like I don't love Jax as a person, but like I'm fine watching him on TV again. I just am.
Yeah, I had the Valley on my list of winners as well. I think what worked so beautifully about this show, I mean, aside from the fact that they came into production with two couples, on the verge of breaking up, and some people who
Yeah,
were clearly very excited to have their chance at being on reality
totally.
TV.
Yep.
I think that the best decision they made was to not give Kristen and Jax any kind of hero edit or any kind of they didn't feel like the protagonists in
Yes.
a way. And I think that part of my part of my uncertainty about this show before it aired was like I don't want to watch the Jax Taylor show.
Mm-mm.
I don't want to watch like
I still don't.
Jax's version of Don't Be Tardy. Like that type of energy. And I think that watching the show, it was so clear that Kristen and Jax and Brittany, their feet were being held to the fire the same way that everyone else's were, and perhaps even more because we have a decade plus of footage to show of them fucking up. And we have
Mm-hmm.
all of these kind of like, even some of the cast members like are some of the other cast members are like referencing things that happened on Vanderpump Rules where it's like, oh, like, Jax, we know this about you kind of thing. And I think if there was a version of this show where Jax and Kristen had EP credits and were kind of, running the ship, I think it would have been a much worse show. And
Definitely.
so I'm really glad that it came together the way it did and that it really felt like kind of this like unvarnished look at how are all of these people handling this phase of their lives.
I think that the desperation element of it actually adds to its effectiveness. You know what I mean? I think that like
Yes.
they're all at this period in their lives of like, and I've said this before on my show, but like I think part of the reason why the Valley hits is kind of like it's one of the first shows, if maybe the first show, to really reflect what it's like when millennials get older and they try to start a family, get married, have a house amid like all this kind of like financial uncertainty that like most of our generation has to go through. You know what I mean? It's like it hits like really close to home in kind of a dark way, but also in a way that like it's watchable. So I don't know. It's really I think the prospect of more from the Valley is really exciting to me.
Yeah, and I think it's so rare for a first season show to genuinely feel like a must watch. You know,
Yes.
it's normal to hear people being like, "Oh, this is actually pretty good," or like, "Oh, if you've watched everything else, maybe you should catch up on this." But The Valley for 12 episodes, it really was like, "No, I cannot wait to see what happens next." And that, I
Right.
mean, hats off to everybody that worked on that show truly because they took something that could have been such a flop and really turned it out.
I agree. All right, Dylan, who is your second loser?
Look,
Here
it
we
brings
go.
me no great joy to say Lala Kent, she screwed the pooch.
She was
I
on my list as well. Yep.
it was Look, this season of Vanderpump Rules, I think I it was tricky for everyone involved, I think. And I don't have I don't begrudge Lala trying to sort of take a certain stance and be
Neither
like
do
a
I.
little bit more in the middle maybe, or to be honest, a little bit of a producer puppet in a way that I think one of the big question marks of this season was like, who's gonna hang out with Tom? Like, you can't have an ensemble show where there's 10 people on one side and then Tom can only hang out with Tom Schwartz.
Right.
Who cares? Like,
Nobody wants to watch
that
that.
wouldn't have worked. And I think I don't blame Lala for kind of taking the bullet a little bit and like, making nice with Tom. I mean, so did James, so did Sheena. We saw everyone except for Ariana and Katie essentially kind of dip their toes in the water of forgiving Tom Sandoval. But the way that Lala sort of turned against
Yeah.
Ariana, it was a bad strategy to begin with. And then it was even worse to see by the reunion after the way that the fans were reacting to her on this season, that she just really dug in her heels and didn't kind of readjust at all. It was confusing to me why she would have done that, but also just like such a bad choice. And I think that, people can have a bad season on a Bravo
Of
show and then
course.
it kind of doesn't really like, manifest in any other way. But I think that people were like genuinely pretty turned off by Lala, especially at the reunion. And I really wonder, like, I know that she has, businesses. I know that she has like, bigger aspirations and stuff. And I'm like, as much as Ariana has like, benefited from all the attention in the last year and a half, I feel like this season of Vanderpump Rules could genuinely like negatively impact Lala's kind of potential to do other stuff.
Totally, which sucks because like to me, she was like one of my favorite people on that show for a long time. Like I think I still think she's a big star. I think that she's like such a she's so watchable in so many ways. But this was like such a moment of misreading the room in a way that was kind of rare for her, honestly. Like she's pretty savvy as a person, I would say, and it
Hmm.
was a total miscalculation. And I recently had like I did like a episode of The Valley and talking about should Vanderpump Rules people go to the Valley? And one of the solutions I think to that is people taking some time off, being away from our screens. Maybe, as you said, I mean, I think that this stink is going to kind of stick to her for a little bit, and
Hmm.
instead of doubling down again, tripling down by like maybe staying on the show, I wonder if the solution for Lala is to take some time away, raise her two kids together, and then maybe eventually jump to the Valley, depending on what Vanderpump Rules
Yeah.
turns into. That I think some time away would do her a lot of good.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to the Valley kind of question of Vanderpump Rules, people going there, I think I think that that makes sense at some point, but I think that
Not
because of how
now.
strong their first season was, I don't think we need, a
I
fresh crop
agree.
of Vanderpumpers getting off the bus in Sherman Oaks. And I think that it would kind of muddy the waters a little bit. And look, there were 12 people on this season of the Valley, and I have questions for every single one of them.
Yeah, of
So
course, of course. No,
I
I'm
don't
saying
think
more
there's a
like
lot of, yeah,
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 I'm
yeah.
saying more like down the line. Like I think that if you give her the same sort of like feeling of okay, I don't have my primary source of income anymore for a year or
Hmm.
two. what does that look like when she gets that back, sort of thing. Same with
Absolutely.
Jackson Kristen. So that's sort of what I think with her. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Who's your loser?
My next loser, Robin Dixon. To
Oh.
me, I mean, I celebrated Potomac for so long as having these four OGs. They broke
Mhm.
records, and she was one of those four, along with Ashley, Karen, and Giselle. And she's the first one that fell kind of between season 8 and 9. And you know, she went into season 8 of Potomac with a primary storyline served up on a silver platter. The stuff that happened towards the end of season 7 with Juan and everything that came out via her podcast, she had so many opportunities to answer for that, to deliver good TV via that. But she and Juan didn't want to play ball. Like she couldn't really take it to that next level in terms of what was going on with them. And she fumbled the bag, I think. And I think that her being fired from the show is a kind of direct result of that. Her and Giselle have gotten way too codependent. And now Giselle has this opportunity to sort of rise from those ashes and prove that she can stand on her own, which I think she can. I think Robin is getting a little bit of a bone by being put on the traders, which I personally, I mean, allegedly, reportedly, whatever, is because she was like a fill-in for Candace, who was pregnant, and they apparently wanted Monique and Candace together. I kind of think Robin feels like a replacement to me. I'm still intrigued to see how she does, but I'm not sure where Robin goes after the traders. Like is she a career reality star? Is she just going to have that franchised, what is it, like a med spa or something that she's opening? I don't know. Like, I just think I don't know what the future looks like for Robin Dixon.
Yeah, I think Robin is an interesting case because just kind of the opposite of what we were just talking about with Lala, of she is a star even if she's not having the best time on her platform right now. I don't mean this to be especially rude, but like I don't know that Robin Dixon is that big of a star. And like I have enjoyed her a lot over the years on Potomac. So I don't mean to say that she, isn't entertaining at all or brings nothing to the table, but like I don't think the way that the other three Potomac
Hmm.
OGs kind of do have that it factor, Robin kind of was always operating at a little bit of a lower frequency.
For
And
sure.
so I'm curious to see how she does on Traders. I think she is funny. I think that she, you know, brings kind of like a good added dimension to a group, but I don't know that she really has that like personality to be kind of that person that you're bringing into these shows, that you're bringing on to, I don't think she's going to get invited on to Watch What Happens Live randomly the way
No,
that
she's not.
some other
Luann
former
and Sonia still
housewives will.
do.
Yes,
Right.
exactly. And so it's tough because I mean, I was expecting, to be honest, a bigger shakeup on Potomac this coming season.
Me too.
Candace sort of took herself out of the running. NECA getting fired was no big surprise. You know, I think that I was a little surprised that Wendy is being brought back, and it wouldn't have shocked me if maybe like Ashley was a friend of or something like that. But really, I mean, they're for the most part they're keeping the cast
Fairly
together,
similar. Yeah.
and so I think Robin, that kind of makes Robin's firing be even a little bit more glaring, that it's like if they were really clearing house, then you kind of couldn't blame her for that. But I think it really felt like kind of an indictment of how she handled the situation last season, that it's like, no, you're the problem here. And that's a tough call.
Yeah, yeah. To me, she was kind of an ensemble player who 8 seasons in, her paycheck was probably pretty big. So
Yes.
when you fire her, you open up a lot of space for some new additions to bring more dynamic elements to the show. So I think you're totally on point there.
Yeah,
All
that's a
right.
good point with the paychecks, because the longer you're on, it's like if every OG is making the same amount, then it's like that number gets bigger and
Yeah,
bigger.
exactly. All right, Dylan, who's your third and final winner for the day?
My third and final winner, it's a joint sleigh of Ariana and Katie, really rounding out
Great choice.
The Vanderpump Rules group. I think going into this season, I mean, obviously Ariana had a lot of goodwill from, being cheated on,
Of
and she turned into
course.
Beyonce, whatever. But I think that like
Okay, Lala.
I, as much as she was had received a lot of love and a lot of opportunities and stuff coming off of last season, I think that that could have just as easily kind of been a little bit of a trap for her to walk into. And I think that she managed to really keep her composure this whole season.
Hmm.
She set her boundaries very clearly and she really didn't waver from those. And I think that as much as people tried to kind of chip away at her resolve in that sense, she was very very clear with what she wanted, what she needed, and what she wasn't going to do. And I think that Katie did an excellent job of kind of being her right hand this season, and that she also set boundaries and was really, pretty clear with how she was going to handle Tom Sandoval and all of that. But I think we also got to see a little bit of a lighter side of Katie,
Hmm.
post divorce. She's not going through the divorce anymore. It's over. Even seeing her dynamic with Schwartz this season made me really happy. The way that they were able to kind of coexist and laugh with each other a little bit and kind of have this like lighter dynamic. And sometimes he says something that's a little bit off-putting and she's like, bro, what? Like, it it made me happy to see. Obviously
It's
now something
sweet.
about her is up and running, and as much as somebody on TikTok is going to tell you that a $17 sandwich is like a crime, look, shit costs what it costs. We live in New York. You can't
Literally.
phase me.
Don't shock me.
um but yeah, I think that Ariana obviously is continuing to get a lot of great opportunities. She's on Love Island right now. She's going back into Chicago later this summer. And I think in a different way, Katie feels like she, out of this entire cast, is sort of in the best position to be fine, kind of whatever happens with the show. That I don't, you know, Sheena, Lala, James, all of those people. I'm like, if this show, if they reboot or recast or get canceled, I don't know what like Sheena's doing for the next 3 years. But I'm like, I think Katie would be like fine. I think she'd figure it out.
Right. Yeah. Katie had her best season ever. In terms of likability, in terms of like connection to the audience, I kind of felt like it was her best season ever. And you're right. I mean, she also has that fairly new podcast with Dana, which is on Nick Vile's podcast network, which like I don't really listen to, but I think it does fairly well. You could totally see her leaving the show, being focusing on the sandwich shop on her podcast and like doing some influencer stuff on the side and like being totally fine. You know what I mean? Like she'd be great.
Yeah, we've seen kind of, I think we're in an era where these people that have been on Bravo for a long time, it's like you don't need to be, your plan for after Bravo doesn't need to be like launching Skinny Girl. Like you can have a podcast, a little side hustle, do some influencer stuff, and really put together like a nice portfolio of like
Diversified
diversified
income.
income.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and so I think for somebody like her, it's like she might, kind of along the Robin Dixon lines, it's like she might not be like the biggest star, but she has the platform to do really well for herself. And I think she's been smart with kind of how she's used that it doesn't feel like she's kind of like sold out or gone against her. I mean, Katie has a very specific personality vibe. And so I
Totally.
think if she was doing a lot of stuff that felt like a not really a fit for her, we would notice. And I think that she's done a good job of kind of maintaining her personal brand.
Absolutely. If anything, she could lean more into that in some areas of her career. Yeah, and I think last thing about Ariana before I do my last winner is like she went into the season. She did some comment on Instagram back when the season was starting, and she was like, "I'm probably going to get the villain at it. I'm probably going to be the villain of this season." And as much as people tried to kind of manifest that to actually happen, it didn't. And so, we know that on Bravo, it's like one season you're up, the next you're down. And with her, maybe take a slight dip, but like she's essentially just as far up as she was at the end of last season. And that's, I think, a testament to the boundaries she set, like you said, and also like she still remained engaged in the show. It's not like she didn't play ball like pretty much 99% of the time. Like she was engaged, she was in the fray, she was opening up, just not with Tom Sandoval, and that's okay.
And as much as Lala was kind of criticizing her for like what she was and wasn't filming, I think what was really important was that she was there the whole time.
Yes.
It wasn't like the season of Atlanta where Nene was like in LA for half the season, or there was a season of Beverly, maybe Garcelle's first season where she was like missing a bunch of stuff because she was like
Right.
off filming other projects. And like I think if Ariana had done that, I think it would have been a little easier to say like, oh, she's checked out, she doesn't give a fuck about this anymore. But like she showed up to everything. Aside from going to Tahoe,
Yeah,
like
exactly.
she
Yeah.
was she
Yeah.
was on every episode, and I think that that
She,
is important.
she could have pulled a Candy from her most recent season of Atlanta, where she was always flying out and doing stuff, which was so annoying to see. All right, so my last winner Okay, I'm gonna say Dorit Kemsley
I thought
because
about this.
she did not have a great last season, right? Like she people didn't love her last season, and that season was this aired this year, a lot of it. But I feel like the Beverly Hills contract negotiations are always sort of like playing out in public. You know what I mean? It's always sort of making headlines. And with her was sort of there's a lot of headlines being made. Her and PK separate sort of amid all of that. And then she locks in her spot on the show. And their separation, I feel like, was something that like pretty much everybody saw coming at some point. It was sort of like, when was it going to happen? It happened at an opportune time. I'm not insinuating anything. I'm just saying it came at the right time for her. And now all of a sudden she has two big storylines actually going into the season they're filming now. Obviously her separation from PK, but also it seems like from the couple things that we've heard from production, her and Kyle are like kind of going at it this season. And like to me, they were last season they were on weird ground, but now if they're kind of embracing the rift in their friendship for a season, to me that's compelling television, and it helps Dorit's spot on the show. It helps, being excited for Beverly Hills and what we're going to see from that. So Dorit kind of went from somebody potentially whose spot on the show was on shaky ground to somebody who's like again solidified her spot and kind of continued this run that's lasted for much longer than I ever expected it to be.
Absolutely. I mean, I think with Beverly Hills, it feels a little different than any other franchise in the sense that like it feels like the storylines are kind of like mapped out almost
Yes.
like in advance, where it's like this season is going to be Kyle and Mauricio, this season is going to be Erica and Tom, and like as much as I think that can sometimes lead to some drawn out storylines that don't give kind of what we want them to, I think with Dorit and PK, it's a no-brainer that this is something that we want to see play out. We want whatever they're going to give us, we will take essentially.
Yeah.
And I think that with the Dorit and Kyle thing, I it kind of goes back to what I was saying about Salt Lake earlier, where I think those women really understand kind of what it takes to maintain a group cast dynamic like this. And I think that Dorit and Kyle, if they can embrace kind of the idea of like, yeah, let's fight this season, like that would be fun.
Exactly.
And I think,
Exactly.
whether it's kind of that kind of knowing decision or whether it really is something that has sprung up organically, to be honest, I don't really care.
Me
I
neither.
just want a compelling season. And so, I was a little disappointed that Crystal's not coming back this
Me
season.
too. I thought it was a mistake.
I am very curious to see how things go with our new housewife Boz and Jennifer Tilly joining the cast and
Question
Kathy Hilton
mark.
returning. Like they've made some interesting choices, and I don't know how they'll play out, but I do agree that Dorit seems poised to be a central figure in the way that last season she really did not feel like she was
No.
in the main.
Essential. She didn't feel
Right, like
essential.
if you were picking your kind of like central three from last season, I don't think Dorit would have been one of them.
I agree. All right, Dylan, last loser of the day.
Okay, my last loser. I was thinking about doing Bethany because she was a loser
She
last
was
time.
kind of on
She's
my list too.
still a loser. I'm gonna choose something a little more abstract, but more interesting than Bethany,
All
I think,
right.
and that's Peacock. I
Yeah.
It's been a little bit of a struggle, and I actually think Peacock is doing pretty well as a streaming service. So this isn't really about like their
The
subscriber
fun. Yeah.
numbers
Yeah.
or
Yeah.
whatever. I watch Peacock like every single day, so it's
From the
certainly
Bravo
not.
perspective.
Yes, it's certainly not a comment on whether it's a streaming service that I use. I think
Certainly not.
I think that like we're now like 4 years into the Peacock experiment, and it feels like we still have not really tapped into the Bravo IP in the way that Peacock sort of seemed like it would allow us to. And there are a couple like there have been a couple notable successes. Obviously, Traders is a huge hit, and it's a rare breakout hit to where like it's not just that Housewives fans like Traders. It is like actually a top rated streaming show. It won an Emmy for its first season for casting for a reality series. I think it will certainly be nominated for its second season, which was better than the
It
first.
was appointment TV. It really was.
Yes, and I think they made the absolute right decision to drop the episodes weekly this season
Hmm.
versus a binge drop. And the other strong point, I think, for Peacock was adding all of those Bravo Vault shows earlier this
Yes.
spring. I think that was something that felt like it would have been a no-brainer kind of on day one of Peacock. And so it's like, okay, yay. I'm glad that you're putting all of this to good use because it's just otherwise it's sitting on a hard drive collecting dust.
Right.
But I feel like we could just be doing more with those types of properties and seeing over the last year and a half, Real Housewives of Miami getting sent back to Bravo after being rebooted by Peacock. I think they're not moving forward at this point with another season of Below Deck Down Under, which was the Peacock original Below Deck franchise. They moved Aisha to Below Deck Med, who was kind of the star of that show. And then Girls Trip is just a huge question mark at this point. It's been exactly a year pretty much since Ronnie Legacy was filmed.
Right.
It seems very, very likely, more than likely, that we are not seeing the Morocco season. I don't think that's technically been confirmed, but like,
No, but
do the
I think the
math.
writing's on the wall. Yeah.
So the fact that it's been a year since they filmed a season of that show, and I have not heard even a rumbling, a rumor, uh, uh, anything bubbling under the surface about the future of that franchise. That they filmed 5 seasons of it in two and a
Three
half,
years.
3 years.
Yeah.
So like, it really felt like that was something that they saw a lot of potential with, and then are just kind of it's languishing right now. And so the big question of like, do they see Peacock as a place for kind of these like Bravo adjacent spin-offs, or is it just going to be traders and that's kind of it?
Sports.
Because like when you see all those vault shows, it's like we're not doing any updated versions of this, not even any like, could we do like some reunion content that's Peacock exclusive? Could we do a Where Are They Now special? Like, I mean, Tabitha was just on Watch What Happens Live, and it's like, for what? Like, it does feel like there are these opportunities that they're not like actively developing. And I don't know if there's a bigger reason for that that we just like haven't heard, but it does seem like something where it's like, if you made some of this stuff, people would watch it.
1,000%. I mean, season 2 of Girls Trip is like canon, honestly. It's like it's
Yes.
highly referenced and it was an amazing show. I like season 1 too. I will say, like, I do the after show kind of has emerged this year as like, I mean, it existed before this year, but to me it emerged as sort of like essential viewing, especially for Summer House and Martha's Vineyard slash Vanderpump Rules slash The Valley. But and we get some like the extended cuts of the reunions and things like that. But I think that's kind of like easy work to like it has a high payoff for
Yes.
them to like satisfy us as Bravo fans. But if you really think big picture, like you were saying, what's really happening there with the Bravo stuff? Like, why aren't things like Bet It All on Blonde happening on Peacock? Why didn't we have the Luann 3-part Luann in the UK series? Why can't we do a Crappy Lake on Peacock once a year? Like, I don't think they'd have to pay them as much. I think that's probably a cost concern, but it's like, I don't know. At the end of the day, like a lot of these reality stars just want to be back on a screen. And there's a lot of people who used to be on shows who would gladly take a check.
Yeah, I even think like when they first rebooted Miami for Peacock, that felt like a really big deal.
A
And
thousand percent.
because it was like, okay, Peacock is in play for like a Housewives franchise, like a proper Housewives franchise. And so, thinking like, okay, so is there gonna be a new franchise that's on Peacock? Could something like Dallas or DC be kind of like in play for Peacock? And I mean, the answer at this point feels like it's no, but I don't know kind of what
Yeah.
conversations they have behind closed doors, but it does just feel like I don't know how the budgets and stuff are decided. They have like, NFL rights to pay for it, but it is just like, could we
I know. I
give us a
know.
little chunk of something?
I know. I know. Oh, all right. My last loser of the day. I was also potentially going to do Bethany slash the Reality Reckoning, which is a flop at this point, but I think I'm going to go with the one show that's been canceled this year, which is Martha's Vineyard. I guess it wasn't fully canceled. It was put on pause, but a pause can be anywhere from a year to 15 years, literally. So I don't know. With Martha's Vineyard, I found it to be like a highly enjoyable show. It was not perfect. They didn't have the formula or the cast quite right, but I just wish it had gotten the chance that original Summer House had gotten between seasons 2 and 3 when they had that slight cast shakeup that I alluded to earlier in the episode that really helped get it on a better track as a show. Because there are some great people on that cast, and I just think that they were missing some single guys. They were missing a through line of a storyline, but it wasn't like it wasn't like it had no potential. I mean, Family Karma got 3 seasons. You know what I mean? I wish that Martha's Vineyard had gotten one more season concurrently to figure it out. I don't think it's dead in the water, but it's a loser that I wish wasn't a loser.
Yeah, it's tough because with a show like that, when you think about it being put on pause, because it is tied to summer, there it's like, okay, so it's gonna at least be on pause for a full year, I'm
Right.
assuming.
Hmm.
There's not really like, oh, we'll take a few months then film in November. Like that's not
They can't do that.
they're boxed into that. I think I to be 100% honest, I did not finish watching season 2. I think I was behind and then I heard that it wasn't coming back and I was like, okay,
Right.
that's one less
Yeah.
thing on my to-do list, which like I don't like feeling like that about Bravo shows, and I certainly don't think that it's a show that had like nothing, no merits. Like I maybe I'll watch it at some point, but it does just feel like they the cast needed some tinkering. It wasn't 100%
Hmm.
there, but that, like you said, like there have been other shows in that position, and then they do the tinkering, and it gets better. And so I think it is always a bummer to see a show that clearly has like at least some sparks of potential kind of not get a chance to explore that more fully. And not to tie everything back to my last loser, but like what if we did season 3 on Peacock? What if we
Right.
did
Totally.
I was actually just uh I was thinking about Shaws of Sunset earlier, and Gigi just posted a picture of her with MJ and Reza together,
Mm,
and it's like, well, I would love to be watching this. Maybe that could be on Peacock. Like it's stuff like that where it's like that could be a potential place for like we're not sure how this is gonna do. Maybe there's less ratings pressure when something is on Peacock. People have more of a chance to discover it kind of on their own time. I don't know kind of exactly how the demographics overlap, but it does just feel like with a show like that, it's like this feels like there is still something there, and now we're just not gonna find out whether it could be something better or not.
right. Right. I wonder if because it's on that summer schedule that like it just wasn't enough time for them to tinker with the cast this year, and maybe they're going to do it over the course of the next year. That's my like hopeful vision for what's happening,
Yeah,
which
that
is
may
I think
be.
entirely possible.
Yeah, I think one thing too, like with Summer House, like OG Summer House, they except for the COVID season, they've always done the format where they go out for the weekends and then they come back to the city, and we see more scenes now like during the week than we used to, which I really
Right.
enjoy.
Me too.
But with Summer House Martha's Vineyard, I think one of the challenges was that it was this different format where both seasons they were at the house for like 2 weeks or something, like not a super long amount of time, but they were there consecutively, and the cast does not all live in New York or around New
Hmm.
York. Like it's a very spread out cast. There's people in Texas, there's people in, you know, North Carolina. I don't
LA.
know. Like
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, they're a pretty spread out geographically cast. So I think it didn't have the same feeling of like a friend group
Hmm.
as regular Summer House does. And even if that's a little bit manufactured on Summer House, like obviously some of these people are better friends IRL than
But it's kind
others.
of
But
true
I
now that
think
they are friends. You know, they're a group.
right, they're whether or not they're each other's best friends, they are a group that has like that real connection. And so I think with Martha's Vineyard, maybe if there was a version of it where the cast had that more of a similar dynamic where they were like living in the city, hanging out
Hmm.
together, and then going out to this house together, it would have been a little easier to kind of keep that momentum.
I totally agree.
Um, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I
Good
think with
point.
with formats and casts and stuff like that, I think being able to be open-minded and change things and play around with formats is a good thing. And so I hope that they're thinking deeper about what they could do with that show. But based on what's happened to some of our other franchises, which I think it has to be said, franchises that feature casts of color have not
Hmm.
necessarily had the best luck on Bravo. We were talking about Family Karma. I mean, Shaw's got 9 seasons, so I don't want to say like, poor them for being on the air for almost a
Right. Right.
decade, but like there have been a lot of these franchises that have just felt like they didn't quite get like the chance that they might have
Yeah.
otherwise.
For sure. For sure. Well, Dylan, we went a little over, but I think we,
Uh,
we we picked some good winners and losers. I feel like, I mean, I you took some of mine, I took some of yours. Shows we're on the same page mostly.
what I just want to ask before we finish, what are you most excited for the second half of this year?
I mean, I almost even put them on my winners, even though the season hasn't even begun, which is OC. I mean, I
Yes.
think so for so many reasons. If you just looked at the season and what it has going for it overall, excited about it, whatever. But in the overall Bravo landscape, it's going to come in at the end of Jersey fatigue when Dubai is still sort of like I'm enjoying Dubai, but it's kind of like light petty drama for the summer. OC's going to come in with a bang because it's going to deliver just like really juicy, good housewives, old school, new school combined stuff. And
Hmm.
I'm so excited for it.
I think it's telling that I don't think either of us mentioned either of the currently airing Housewives franchises once this
That's a
entire
really good
episode.
point, Dylan.
That it's like I have a lot of thoughts about Jersey this season, but
Me
I would
too.
not say that they are some of my winners.
No, there's a lot. It's a lot of murky water in Jersey right now, which
Yes.
puts them in the middle for a lot of reasons. But and also the future is so up in the air too, so it's hard to label it a winner or a loser, you know?
Right. Some of them are going to win and some of them are probably going
And
to
we
lose in a
don't
big
know
way.
who. And we don't know
And
who.
and anything that we see for the next 6 months is probably not right anyway. So
Period.
check that.
Dylan, thank you for doing this. When do you release new episodes of Mention at all? Where can people plug all the things?
Oh yeah, thank you for having me. This is so fun. Happy to come back and update our tallies.
We're gonna do it twice a
You can
year,
listen.
forever.
Yeah, you can listen to Mention It All wherever you listen to Gabbing with Give. We usually put out 3 episodes a week, a mix of solo episodes, fun guests. Gibson has been on many a time. Lots of Bravo Labs. I have an episode with Caroline Stanbury that's coming out today as we're
Ooh,
recording, so it'll already be out when you're listening. But yeah, I'm the same age as Sergio, which is really just sobering for me. um,
sobering.
but yeah, and you can follow Bravo by Betches on Instagram and me at Dylan Hafer.
Same age without the codependence, which is, you have that going for you.
Look, I have my issues too.
Dylan, thanks for doing this. We'll talk again soon. I want to gab.